I saw him before he saw me. Not in the dramatic way, not in the cinematic moment where the world narrows and the air thins and everything freezes. No, I saw him standing by the assignment board with his back to me, a pencil in his mouth, and his shoulder twitching like he was sketching the names down instead of reading them. And just like that, the week soured. Leo Martin, here, at the same 6-week creative residency I'd nearly torn apart my application for, the one I'd only barely talked myself into believing I deserved, the one I'd whispered into the dark, maybe this will fix something. He turned as I stepped closer, eyes narrowing like he'd expected me to arrive eventually, like I was the one intruding on his space, not the other way around. "Amara," he said, not surprised, not warm, not cold, just my name, like it was an object he'd put down and forgot he still owned. "Leo," I said. The name tasted bitter. We both looked back at the board. Project Pairings, Week 1, Vale, Martin, of course. We walked in silence back to the studio hall. His sketchbook was tucked under one arm, the corner frayed like always. I could hear the familiar click of his pencil as he spun it in his fingers. He used to do that in critique sessions, always pretending to be half listening when he wasn't. The summer residency grounds were beautiful, annoyingly so, tucked beside a slow-moving coastal cliff, all cream stone and wildflower paths and glass studio walls that begged for vulnerability. Leo belonged here in a way I never had. He'd always looked like he walked out of a charcoal drawing, all pale knuckles and dark brows and that frustrating calm, like nothing ever touched him unless he let it. "I didn't know you applied," I said, eventually, because silence made me feel smaller than I wanted to. "I didn't," he replied. I stopped walking. "What?" He glanced at me. "Professor Jameson submitted my portfolio. I found out after I got the email." A pause. "Apparently, I need to learn how to work with people I have history with." He said it like he was quoting someone or mocking them. I folded my arms. "So this is a learning experience for you?" He didn't answer, but he didn't smile either. I was grateful for that. The shared studio smelled like paper and oil paints and a window someone had left cracked during the night. The chairs weren't assigned, but I sat near the window anyway, hoping he'd take the hint and keep distance. He didn't. He pulled the stool across from mine, set his sketchbook down, and opened it to a fresh page without looking at me. I pulled out my manuscript, the latest one. Raw, unfinished, I wasn't proud of it, which meant, of course, he would love tearing it apart. "Want to set some rules?" I asked. He raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Like, no personal attacks, no copying each other's ideas, no pretending the last year didn't happen." He held my gaze for a long second, then said, "I never copied your idea." "Right," I said tightly, going back to my pages. "You just accidentally made a visual piece with the exact same metaphor the week after reading mine aloud in critique." He said nothing. I didn't look up, but I could feel him watching me. Not the lazy kind of stare, the kind that cataloged, that stored, that waited for the right line to hit where it hurt most. "I don't want to fight," he said after a minute. I looked at him. Could have fooled me. He sighed, shut his sketchbook. Fine, no fighting, no pretending, but also no rewriting history. I nodded once. Deal. For the rest of the afternoon, we worked in near silence. Pencil scratching, pages rustling, a breeze shifting the curtain behind me. I caught his hand moving, not sketching the scene, but something else, something private. And then I realized something deeply annoying. He was drawing with his right hand. He was left-handed. I looked up. He was smirking. Still observant, he said. I wanted to throw my pen at him. Instead, I went back to my work. I wrote for 20 minutes straight, not thinking, not stopping, until the words blurred a little. When I looked up again, the sun had shifted and his face was gold with it. Brows furrowed, hand still sketching, lips slightly parted in focus. I hated how I remembered the shape of them. So I stood, packed my things, and left without saying goodbye. Let him think I was still angry. The truth was worse. I wasn't sure if I was. The second day, I told myself I wouldn't care if he was late. He wasn't. Leo was already in the studio when I arrived, his sketchbook open, a travel mug beside him, and a half-done line of charcoal across the page, like he'd been mid-thought. He looked up just long enough to acknowledge me, then back down. I nodded once and took the seat across from him without speaking. It was surprisingly easy, like we'd done this before. Like the tension had become furniture in the room, something you walked around without noticing. I made coffee, he said, after a while, without looking up. There's more if you want. I didn't answer, but when I walked over to the counter 10 minutes later and poured myself a cup, I made sure he saw. By mid-morning, we'd settled into something that felt dangerously like routine. I wrote, he sketched. Occasionally, he'd glance at my pages, frown slightly, and then return to his drawings. Is that my character? I asked finally, when I couldn't stand it anymore. Leo looked up. Maybe. Did you ask? You're the one who said no pretending. I stared at him. That doesn't mean you get to interpret my work without permission. He closed his sketchbook, then read it out loud. What? You're the one who doesn't let anyone in, Amara. Maybe if I heard it in your voice, I'd get it right. I froze, fingers curling slightly around my notebook. He didn't say it to be cruel. That was the worst part. There wasn't any sharpness in his voice, just observation, neutral, honest. You always think you know better, I said quietly. Leo shrugged. Only about art. People, not so much. Something about that pulled the wind out of my chest. I sat back, heart ticking a little too fast. Then, before I could stop myself, I turned to a clean page and read the scene aloud. It wasn't long, just a conversation between two characters who loved each other, but only spoke through letters and notes slipped under doors. When I finished, I didn't look up. The silence stretched so long, I almost regretted saying anything. Then, that's the first thing you've written here that felt like it was about you. I did look up then. It's fiction. His eyes didn't move. If you say so. We didn't speak for the next hour, but he kept sketching, I kept writing, and I hated that some part of me wanted to ask what he'd drawn. At one point, a breeze slipped through the cracked window and lifted the edge of his sketchbook, just enough for a glimpse, Not a character, not a metaphor. Me, sitting at the table, reading, my mouth slightly open, one hand in my hair. My handwriting was scribbled beneath it, a line from the scene I'd just read aloud. I don't know how to speak love out loud, but maybe this is close. He noticed me looking, didn't flinch. Delete it, I said, softly, not angry, just unsure. I could, he said, or you could tell me why you hate being seen. I didn't answer. He didn't push. The air changed between us, only a little, but it stayed that way. The third day, it rained. Not politely, not a poetic drizzle. It poured. Sheets of it, rattling the studio windows and flooding the gravel paths between buildings. People stayed in their dorms or migrated to the larger shared hall, which meant our studio was quieter than usual. Just us, the sound of the storm, and the scent of graphite and paper. Leo wore a black sweater with the sleeves pushed to his elbows, a charcoal smudge already on his jaw. I didn't ask what he was working on. He didn't ask what I was writing. But sometime before lunch, he said, "You ever write something that scared you?" I paused mid-sentence. Scared me how? Like, he tapped his pencil against the sketchbook? Like, if someone read it, they'd know too much. Not about the characters, about you. I blinked, all the time. He looked at me, surprised. "You think I write like I'm hiding something," I said. "But the truth is, every time I write, I'm trying to tell the truth. I just don't always like what it is." Leo sat back, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, slowly. That was all. But something shifted. Not loudly, not suddenly, just a quiet moment where the wall between us didn't feel so thick. We ended up working side by side at the same table, not across from each other. I told myself it was practical. Better light, more room to spread out. But I noticed the way our elbows occasionally brushed, the way he angled his sketchbook slightly toward me, like an invitation he wasn't brave enough to speak aloud. I responded without speaking too, leaving a draft of my short story open just slightly in his direction. After a while, he leaned over. "You spelled catastrophe wrong." I glared at him. "No, I didn't." He pointed. "One E too many." I looked. He was right. I groaned and crossed it out. He smirked. "You're welcome." And I smiled. Just a little, just to myself. But it was real. By late afternoon, the storm had turned the sky gold gray, and the studio took on that rare kind of hush that only happens when two people are focused on the same thing for hours. I was writing a scene, two characters sitting on a rooftop saying nothing, learning how not to be alone. It wasn't what I'd planned to write, but it came naturally. When I looked up, Leo had drawn a rooftop. Not exactly like mine, but close. A figure sat near the edge, feet dangling into nothing, eyes half closed, like she was listening to something no one else could hear. My heart knocked hard against my ribs. "You didn't even read this yet," I whispered. Leo didn't look up. Didn't have to. That was the first time it happened. That was the first time I forgot, just for a breath, that I was supposed to hate him. It was easier after that. Not easy, just easier. The way a song stuck in your head eventually faded into background noise. Still there, still shaping the rhythm of your thoughts, but quieter, manageable. That's what it felt like being around Leo now. I still didn't trust him. still flinched sometimes when he got too close, but the sharp edge of our history had dulled into something else, something heavier, something harder to name. We were working late again. The others had filtered out one by one until the building was mostly empty, except for a light down the hall and the soft sound of jazz from someone's open laptop. I sat curled in the window alcove with my notebook on my knees. Leo sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through an old sketchbook filled with half-formed ideas and quick lines. The silence between us wasn't awkward anymore. It felt chosen. He glanced up. "You stopped reading out loud," he said. I looked at him. "You stopped asking." Fair. I hesitated, then flipped to the newest page. "You want to hear it?" He blinked, just once, like I'd caught him off guard. "Then, yeah, I do." I read slowly, voice low, not dramatic, not performative, just mine. The piece was raw, unedited, messy in the middle, but I didn't pause to explain. I just let the words be what they were. When I finished, I looked up. Leo was staring at me. Not in a way that made me uncomfortable, just in a way that made me feel seen. Like I'd said something only he understood. "What?" I asked, suddenly unsure. He shook his head slightly. "That scene where she lets him touch her hand for the first time, that line about not pulling away even when she wants to." I swallowed. "Yeah? It's honest." He didn't say beautiful. He didn't say well written. He said honest, which was worse and better and worse. There was a long pause. Neither of us moved. And then he shifted, just a little, just enough that his knee brushed mine beneath the window bench. A single point of contact, skin against fabric, familiar, new, electric. Neither of us pulled away. Not right away. I held my breath. He did too. Then I moved my leg, not fast, not sharply, just enough. Enough to break the moment before it broke me. Leo looked down, said nothing. I turned my eyes back to the window. The rain had started again, soft this time, a hush over the world. We didn't speak for the rest of the hour, but something had changed again. Something we wouldn't talk about. Not yet. I didn't mean to tell him. That was the problem with silence, with comfort. It tricks you into thinking you're safe, that the thing you've been holding in your chest won't hurt if you let it out in pieces. It was the 5th night in the studio, past 10, the kind of quiet that didn't ask for anything. I was tired, and tired people say too much. We sat on the floor again, a heap of pages between us. He was redrawing a sketch from earlier, refining the shape of a figure leaning into wind. I was editing dialogue, deleting half of it. It all sounded wrong when I read it out loud in my head. "Have you ever written something you couldn't finish?" I asked. Leo didn't look up. "You mean because it was bad, or because it got too close?" "The second one." He paused, thumb smudging a charcoal line. "Yeah." I nodded, not expecting more. But then, "It was about a train station," he said. "Two people parting, no dialogue, just presence. I couldn't draw her face." "Why not?" He met my eyes. "Because she looked too much like someone I didn't want to say goodbye to." The air went very still. And then, as if something in me had been unlocked, I said it. My father left when I was 10, walked out, no note, no reason. Leo didn't speak, just listened. I thought it was my fault for a long time, I continued, because I was quiet, because I didn't smile enough, because I was easier to leave than stay for. I wasn't looking at him when I said it. I was staring at the page in front of me, the words I'd written hours ago, now blurring slightly at the edges. I think that's why I write the way I do, why I hate being read, because if someone really gets it, gets me, and then still leaves, I trailed off. A pause. I didn't expect comfort, but part of me, the foolish, young, cracked part, expected words, a reply, something. Instead, Leo just watched me. Not cold, not distant, just quiet. And it hurt more than if he'd said something wrong. He stood after a minute, walked to the sink, washed the charcoal off his hands. The sound of water was loud in the room. I stayed on the floor. When he came back, he didn't sit beside me. He left his sketchbook on the table and walked out. Not angry, not fast, just gone. I told myself I didn't care, that he didn't owe me anything, that I'd overshared, and this was what I deserved for expecting softness from someone who'd never claimed to have it. But when I packed up my things that night, my hands shook, not from what I'd said, from how little he'd said back. I didn't leave because I did. Because she said something that cracked the center of me, and I knew if I stayed 1 second longer, I would have said something too honest, something I couldn't take back, something like, "Me too," or worse, "I've always seen you." And I couldn't give her that, not yet, not when she was still bleeding in front of me. I walked until the rain soaked through my sweater and my sketchbook started to curl under my arm. The coast wasn't far, just down the gravel path, past the fire trail, through a break in the trees. The sea was black with fog, churning slow and heavy, like it knew something I didn't. I sat on a cold stone and opened the sketchbook anyway. Pages stuck, fingers froze, but I drew. Not her face, not yet. Just hands, open, uncertain, held out in some imagined space where someone else might reach back. The truth was, I'd known Amara would be here. Jameson didn't tell me directly, but when he handed me the confirmation letter, he said, "There will be people you'll have to face." He meant her. The girl I'd once admired from across a critique circle, the girl who wrote with knives and silence, the girl who tore apart my first exhibition piece without flinching, and was right. The girl who thought I stole from her, who still didn't know that piece I submitted, the one she hates me for, wasn't based on her writing. It was based on her, on the way she sat at the edge of the courtyard, tracing words into her wrist with her fingertip when she didn't think anyone saw. I didn't defend myself back then because I didn't know how. She was fire and spine and principle. I was graphite and stillness and blur. So I let her think what she needed to. It was easier than saying, "I didn't copy you. I loved what you made, and it made me make something too." But when she told me about her father, when her voice cracked and she kept talking anyway, something in me broke. Because I knew exactly what she meant about being too quiet, too easy to leave. I just didn't know how to say it out loud. So I walked out. I thought silence would be kinder. But maybe that's the worst lie I tell myself. I stayed by the coast until my fingers wouldn't move anymore.
Then I walked back, cold and slow. I didn't expect her to be in the studio when I returned. She wasn't, but her manuscript was, left open, one line circled, fresh ink still damp. I would have let him stay if he'd asked. My throat tightened. I sat in her chair and didn't touch it, just read that line until the words faded into something else. Something like a second chance.
I didn't sleep. Not really. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, counting breaths like that would stop my chest from aching, like I could breathe around the absence he'd left behind. He didn't come back to the studio. Not last night, not during curfew, not when I checked twice, just to be sure. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't say what I said for him, that it wasn't some broken wish for comfort or understanding or closeness. I told myself I would have said it to anyone. But the truth? I hadn't said it to anyone, not once, only him. And he left. I didn't expect to go back to the studio early the next morning. I told myself I'd work in my dorm or the common room, or maybe not at all. But my legs moved anyway. Memory was stronger than pride. The rain had stopped, leaving the sky pale and hungover. The sea was quiet in the distance, and the gravel path crunched soft beneath my boots. When I opened the studio door, the first thing I noticed was that it was warm. Someone had been there. The second thing was that he wasn't, but something else was. My manuscript was where I left it. Same spot on the table, same pages, slightly curled. But now, the top page was turned, and something was resting on it. A folded sheet of sketch paper. No name, no message, just a drawing. It wasn't finished, only lines and shading, still rough around the edges, but it was unmistakable. It was me. Not posed, not romanticized, just me, sitting cross-legged, notebook open, head tilted in thought, the corner of my lip caught between my teeth like I was thinking through the next line before it landed. And beneath it, faint, so faint I almost missed it, a single sentence written in pencil along the edge. I didn't leave because of what you said. I left because I couldn't trust myself to answer. I stood there, staring at it, heart pounding so loudly I was afraid it would echo off the walls. Then I sat down, took out a pen, and kept writing. Not to explain, not to fix it, just to keep the line between us from going quiet again. He didn't come in until late. I was already there, writing. I didn't expect him to say anything, and for a moment, I thought he wouldn't. He entered the studio silently, dropped his bag near the shelf, and moved around like someone trying not to break the space. He paused a few feet behind me. I didn't turn. Then, I saw what you left. My hands stilled on the page. He moved closer, not too close, just enough for his voice to reach without raising it. You circled that line, he said. I nodded. I wasn't sure you would. Now, I turned to look at him. Leo looked the same as he always did, composed, pale, eyes too sharp. But something in his face was softer, hesitant even. I almost didn't, I said. But you left a sketch of me. In a room, I could have burned it. He gave a ghost of a smile. I knew you wouldn't. That's bold of you. I've been bold before. And wrong, I added. Yeah, a lot. There was a silence between us, but not the painful kind, just the kind where words didn't rush in too quickly, where they waited their turn. Then he pulled something out of his pocket, a small folded slip of paper, thinner than his usual sketch sheets. He held it out. I wrote something, he said. I didn't take it, not yet. You wrote something, I asked, not drew? I know, he said, I'm not you. But last night, I didn't want to draw it. I took the paper, unfolded it. It wasn't a letter, not really. Just a few lines in his handwriting, small, slanted, uncertain. You weren't too quiet. You weren't too easy to leave. You were just young, and someone failed you. That's not yours to carry. The words sat in my chest like warmth pressed against a bruise. I didn't speak for a while. Then I asked, "Did you mean it?" Leo looked directly at me. I don't say things I don't mean. That's when it shifted. Not all at once, but deeply. Like something inside me settled. Like my guard, my endless need to cut first, to walk away before anyone else did, loosened its grip. Not because I trusted him fully, not yet, but because for the first time, I didn't feel alone in the room. I folded the paper again, carefully, and tucked it into my notebook. Then, quietly, I'm not done being mad at you. He nodded. I'm not done being sorry. And for once, we both meant it. We didn't decide to work together. We just didn't stop. After the note, after the honesty and the silence, and whatever passed between us that night, we came in the next morning and sat at the same table. No one said, "Let's try again." No one apologized for the 100 ways we'd failed to earlier. We just opened our notebooks and began. The prompt for the week was quiet as confession. I wrote the phrase down, stared at it, and laughed softly to myself. Leo looked up. What? I turned my notebook so he could see it. Confession? That's a little on the nose, isn't it? He raised an eyebrow. Are you saying you have more to confess? Do you? We held each other's gaze for a second too long. Then he dropped his eyes to the page. Maybe. The project became something neither of us expected. A series of narrative vignettes, mine, paired with single, spare, black and white sketches, his. No titles, no dialogue, just image and language and breath between the lines. Each piece about a moment where a person could speak or stay silent, and chose one over the other. We worked on it for hours, layering pieces together on the studio wall, rearranging them, testing the order like music, like timing mattered. Some days, I'd write something too sharp, too clean, and he'd ask, what would it look like if you left it messy? Other days, he'd overdraw, add too much detail, and I'd ask, what if you trusted the empty space to speak? We didn't fight, not once.
The tension wasn't gone. It had just changed. Now it lived in our closeness, the way we leaned over the same paragraph, the way his sleeve brushed mine when he reached for a pencil, the way we both paused too often before saying each other's names. One afternoon, I walked into the studio and found he'd added something to the wall. A new sketch, one I hadn't seen. A figure seated at a typewriter, her back hunched slightly, fingers poised just above the keys. Not typing, just waiting. Her hair was wrong, too long, but I recognized the tension in her shoulders, the way she curled slightly inward, as if protecting something inside her chest. I stepped closer. There was a caption below the image, in Leo's handwriting. I want to tell you, but the telling is where it breaks. I swallowed hard. He came up beside me, quiet. I can take it down. No, I said. I didn't look at him when I said it, but I didn't look away from the sketch either. I think that's the first time I've seen what it feels like in my head. Leo didn't smile, but his voice was soft. I've been trying to draw that since last year. That was when I realized this wasn't about proving ourselves anymore. It wasn't about finishing a project or being selected for the final showcase. It wasn't even about making something beautiful. It was about making something true, together, and maybe, just maybe, finding a way to stop being afraid of the same things.
We stayed late again. We hadn't planned to, but the project was finally starting to feel real, like something outside of us, something alive. The wall in the studio was nearly full now, covered in our pieces. His sketches, my writing, layered and overlapping like a language only we spoke. At some point, the lights flickered, not off, just dimmed slightly, as if the room knew we needed quiet. Leo sat on the floor, legs stretched out, back against the bookshelf. I sat beside him without thinking. Close enough that our arms brushed when we shifted. Neither of us moved away. I don't know how long we sat like that, an hour maybe, long enough that the silence turned warm. He was flipping through a set of drawings we hadn't used. I was scribbling edits into the margin of a story about a girl who leaves the same letter in 10 different places, hoping someone finds one. You never said what your favorite piece is, I said softly. Leo looked over. Of yours? I nodded. He paused, then tapped the story I was editing. That one. I blinked. Why? Because it's not angry. I glanced down. I didn't think I wrote angry things. He gave me a look. Not cruel, just knowing. You write like you're holding a match over your heart and daring someone to blow it out. I smiled, but it hurt. Yeah, I whispered. I guess I do. He didn't say anything, but his arm shifted, and his fingers brushed lightly against mine where they rested on the page. Not an accident, not a demand, just a touch, small, steady, there. I didn't move. I could have. My hand wasn't trapped. But I didn't. I turned my palm slightly, let our fingers align, not holding, not grabbing, just meeting, skin to skin. His thumb grazed the inside of my wrist, and my breath caught. We didn't look at each other.
We just stayed like that, still, quiet, too aware. It wasn't a kiss, it wasn't a confession, but it was the first time I let him touch me without flinching, and the first time he didn't pull away like he'd gone too far. He just stayed, and I stayed, and for a while, that was enough.
The next day, I almost didn't go. Not because I was angry, not because I was confused, because I was scared. Scared that what happened between us on the floor, that small, silent meeting of hands, might mean something different to him than it did to me. Or worse, that it meant everything to both of us, and we were still pretending it didn't. He was already there when I arrived. Sketchbook open, pencil in hand, but not moving. He looked up as I entered, not surprised, not tense, just watching me, like he was waiting for something. So I gave it to him. I need to ask you something. Leo closed the sketchbook without looking down. Okay. I didn't sit, just stood across from him, the table between us. That piece you submitted last year, the one that won. He didn't move. That was mine, wasn't it? He flinched, barely, but I saw it. I mean, I continued, voice steady, you took the image from my writing, from that scene I shared in workshop, the girl on the rooftop, the cigarettes, the fog. You drew it, entered it, won with it. Leo was silent. My heart was racing. I hated how calm I sounded. I just want the truth, I said, finally, even if it hurts. He looked at me then, really looked at me. And then he said, no, it wasn't yours. I stared. But, he added, softer, it was about you. He stood, slowly. I didn't steal your scene. I didn't copy your metaphor. The girl in the sketch wasn't smoking or on a rooftop. She was just sitting in the rain. And the look on her face, it was the same one you wore after you read your piece out loud. He stepped closer, careful. I drew what I saw in that moment. You. Not your story. Just you. I swallowed. Then why didn't you say that? Because I was afraid, he said. Afraid you'd hear it as a lie, or worse, as a confession I didn't deserve to make. The room felt too quiet. My hands curled at my sides, fists of breath and nerves. Do you still have it? I asked. He nodded. Can I see it? He walked to his bag, took out a folder, opened it. The drawing was simple. Sparse lines, soft shading. A girl, seated, knees pulled up, hair clinging to her cheek from rain. Her eyes were open, barely. But it wasn't my scene. It was my face, and something broke in my chest. I looked at him. I hated you, I whispered. I know. For a long time, I know. I wanted to believe you did it to hurt me, that it was personal. He stepped closer. It was personal, he said, just not like that. He reached out, slowly, and touched my hand. Not possessive, not begging, just presence. And if I kissed you right now, he asked, voice low, would you still hate me? I didn't answer with words. I just leaned in.
and kissed him. It wasn't wild or fast or dramatic. It was slow, soft, deliberate. Like something we'd both been trying not to write. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead lightly against mine. I've wanted to do that since you tore my first critique to pieces. I smiled. Maybe don't wait that long next time.
The night of the final showcase, the studio was lit like a gallery. Soft spotlights, clean walls, quiet anticipation. The kind of hush that always came before judgment, but this time it didn't feel like fear. It felt like permission. Each pair presented what they'd made: films, installations, performances, some loud, some chaotic, some raw. Ours was last. They gave us one wall. We didn't speak before it started. No introductions, no explanation, just the sequence, alternating panels of story and sketch, arranged in a winding line, like a conversation between two different forms of silence. A girl waiting in a stairwell, a boy with a letter he never sends, two hands reaching across a kitchen table, not touching. A window cracked open to the sound of rain. And at the center of it all, the piece we'd built around everything we hadn't said out loud. Her words. Maybe the bravest thing I ever did was not write the ending. His sketch. A girl in the rain, knees pulled to her chest, eyes open, looking back. We didn't expect applause. We didn't expect anything. But when we stepped back, the room was quiet in a different way. Not waiting, not judging, just holding us. Someone whispered, "That felt like being seen." And I almost cried. Not because they understood, but because for once I hadn't been afraid to show them. Afterward, Leo and I walked out into the night air. No one followed. We didn't speak. We stood at the edge of the path, the ocean breathing below us. Then he said, "So, what now?" I looked at him, at the boy I used to hate for seeing too much, and the man I'd learned to love for not turning away. "Now we write something new," I said. He smiled. The same smile from that first sketch he left on my desk. And for the first time, I smiled back. No pretense, no protection, just yes.